Welcome to Order Militaris Radio TV, and today is our expose on Christendom College. Is it a Gladio operation and founded in a college by Skull and Bones? And we welcome Brother Alexis to the show.
Thank you, AJ, for having me on for Order Militaris Radio TV. It's always a pleasure to be on this apostolate that's breaking new grounds in independent Catholic media. And today we're continuing a series we never intended to start, but of investigation that's led one thing to another. And I'm very surprised at what we have found about Christendom College. And we're just going to cite you facts, okay? As you, as a Catholic, draw your own conclusions. But I think there's enough circumstantial evidence to raise the question of whether Christendom College is a Catholic institution or whether it's an institution organized by Skull and Bones or the CIA to infiltrate the Catholic Church and be a recruiting ground for agents of the deep state. So let's just cover the facts. So the story begins with William Buckley Sr., the father of the famous conservative writer and speaker, Buckley Jr. So let's start with his father, William Buckley Sr. Who was he?
Yep. William Buckley Sr., born July 11th, 1881, died October 5th, 1958. He was born with the fourth of 8 children in Washington on the Brazos, Texas. Son of Mary Ann Langford and John C. Buckley. His parents had immigrated to Texas from Hamilton, Ontario, Canada in 1874. Both their families had immigrated to Canada from Ireland, from Limerick and Cork, respectively. Langford is a name of English or Norman origin, while Buckley is an Anglicized version of Buchala, a surname quite common in Ireland. So, in 1882, the family relocated to Washington on the Brazos to San Diego, Duval County, Texas, where John Buckley was a businessman who worked in merchandising, politics, sheep raising. He was elected several times as Duval County Sheriff. After William Frank finished school, he taught Spanish-speaking pupils in the country school near Benavides. He retained a knowledge of and friendship with the Spanish-speaking people his entire life. Now, Buckley Sr. attended University of Texas at Austin. He worked to further his Spanish language skills and acted as an assistant to the professor in the Romance Languages department. He also worked as a Spanish translator along with his sister, Priscilla Buckley, for the Texas General Land Office. He helped found the University of Texas chapter of the Fraternity Delta Tau Delta as a devout Catholic. Buckley was part of an effort to purchase property near the University for a Newman Club. After the death of his father in 1904, Buckley commissioned building a large house at Lavaca in 19th Street in Austin, now the site of the Cambridge Tower, where his mother lived until her death in 1930. He obtained a Bachelor of Science degree in 1904 from the University of Texas and his Bachelor of Laws from the University of Texas Law School. In 1905, he was elected editor of the University of Texas yearbook, The Cactus. In 1909, Buckley received his license to practice law and was elected as a member of the Texas Bar Association. So he gets all that schooling. In 1917, Buckley married Aloysia Josephine Antonia Steiner of New Orleans. She was a Swiss-German and some Irish ancestry. They had 10 children. Aloysia, short story writer, John, oil business, Priscilla, a journalist, James, senator and judge, Jane, a non-writer, Bill, National Review founder, Patricia, Triumph magazine collaborator, Reed, public speaking teacher, Marine, oversaw National Review subscriptions, and Carol, another author. His 10 children produced about 50 grandchildren. Buckley supervised his children's education, ensure they learn Spanish and French, as well as excellent English. After living in Mexico and South America, the family lived for years in England, France, and the United States. The children attended private Catholic schools in England, France. During the 1920s, the Buckleys purchased properties called the Great Elm in Sharon, Connecticut, and Kamchatka in Camden, South Carolina for homes when they lived in the United States.
Now, you get the impression that the family came into wealth. How did that happen?
Well, he was a lawyer in Mexico. Didn't happen there.
You get involved in the oil industry somehow. Do you have some information on that?
Yeah. In 1913, Buckley founded and became president of the Pantique Oil Company based in Tampico. In 1914, during tensions with the United States, President Huerta appointed Buckley counsel for the convention organized by Argentina, Brazil, and Colombia. The nations known as the ABC powers were working to mediate relations between Mexico and the U.S. because of their implications for Latin America. Buckley turned his legal practice over to his brothers to speculate in real estate and leasing of oil lands. In 1914, the U.S. occupied Veracruz following an incident related to Mexicans importing illegal German arms. Buckley refused an offer by President Woodrow Wilson to be appointed as acting civil governor of the Mexican state of Veracruz. In 1919, Buckley testified for the U.S. Senate Joint Subcommittee on Foreign Relations as an expert on conditions in Mexico. He then founded the American Association of Mexico, or AAM, a lobby group working to amend Article 27 of the 1917 Mexican Constitution to remove the recent restrictions on individual American ownership of land and oil rights. In 1921, the Mexican government expelled Buckley because of his AAM activity. Buckley reported on his expulsion to the Secretary of State of the United States in 1922. He donated his papers to the University of Texas in 1923. In 1924, Mexican President Plutarco Elias Calles invited Buckley to return to Mexico, but instead he transferred his Pantepic Oil Company to Venezuela. And his first major deal was made with Standard Oil during the 1930s. Rockefeller.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be when the large oil field was discovered in Pantepec's Venezuelan lands. During his career, Buckley was primarily interested in unexplored territory. In 1946, he began developing his holdings into separate companies. His operation became international with holdings in Canada, Florida, Ecuador, Australia, the Philippines, and Israel and Guatemala.
Israel?
Yep.
So after that, he becomes super wealthy, I would imagine.
Yep.
Do you have any information on that?
No. That's where
so he was. So he basically was a prospector for Standard Oil, which is the Rockefeller family. So we know the Rockefellers are skull and bones. So now let's do William Buckley Jr. William Buckley Jr. just happens to go to Yale, doesn't he, and become a member of Skull and Bones. And this happenstance is not happenstance at all, has everything to do with the father's business relations. So let's start with the life of William Buckley Jr. and follow it throughout all its years to see what he was involved in. He was a very influential figure in the United States. He claimed during his life to be a Catholic. The thing about his father, who claimed to be a Catholic, is his father was buried in a non-Catholic cemetery. Isn't that true? South Carolina.
Yeah.
Which is something no Catholic would have ever done in the 60s. It would only happen if you were refused burial. And in the 60s, the only way that you could be refused burial in a Catholic cemetery is if you died a public sinner and he didn't divorce his wife, or if you were known to be a Mason.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't have any information of that. We just know he was buried in unconsecrated ground, which in the 60s would have been unheard of for a Catholic. So that's to the life of his son, William Buckley Jr.
William Buckley Jr. was born November 24th, 1925 in New York City. And let's see here. He was the sixth of 10 children. Buckley moved as a boy with his family to Mexico, then to Sharon, Connecticut, before beginning his formal schooling in Paris, where he attended first grade. By the age of 7, he received his first formal training in English at the day school in London. His first and second languages were Spanish and French. As a boy, Buckley developed a love for music, sailing, horses, hunting, and skiing, all interests reflected in his later writings. He was homeschooled through the 8th grade using the Calvert School of Baltimore's homeschool curriculum. Just before World War II, at age 12 and 13, he attended the Jesuit preparatory school, St. John's, Beaumont in England. And let's see here. Okay.
So he goes to a Jesuit preparatory school, but for college he goes to Yale, which is a Masonic university.
Mm-hmm.
That's just inconceivable for a devout Catholic family.
Yeah.
So his years at Yale, what did he do there? Do we know?
Let's see here.
First he was in the Second World War. Let's not admit that.
Yeah.
Well, at least say he served in the military. He didn't actually see action.
Okay. Buckley attended the National Autonomous University of Mexico in 1943. The following year, upon his graduation from the U.S. Army Officers Candidate School, he was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the United States Army. In his book, Miles Gone By, he briefly recounts being a member of the Franklin Roosevelt's Honor Guard upon Roosevelt's death. He served stateside throughout the war at Fort Benning, Georgia, Fort Gordon, Georgia, and Fort Sam Houston, Texas. And at the end of the World War II in 1945, Buckley enrolled at Yale University, where he became a member of the secret Skull and Bones Society and was a masterful debater. He was an active member of the Conservative Party of the Yale Political Union, served as the chairman of the Yale Daily News, and as an informer for the FBI. Buckley studied political science, history, economics at Yale, graduating with honors in 1950. He excelled on the Yale debate team under the tutelage of Yale professor Roland G. Osterweiss. Buckley honed his acerbic style. In 1951, along with many other Ivy League alumni, Buckley was recruited into the Central Intelligence Agency. He served for 2 years, including 1 year in Mexico City, working on political action for E. Howard Hunt, who was later jailed for his part in the Watergate affair. The two authors remained lifelong friends. In a November 1st, 2005 column for the National Review, Buckley recounted while he worked for the CIA, the only CIA employee he knew was Hunt, his immediate boss. While stationed in Mexico, Buckley edited The Road to Yemen, a book by Peruvian author Eduardo Eduardo Cia Ravenous.
I'll just point out that it's not surprising that a lot of member intellectuals at Yale were recruited into the CIA, because the CIA was founded by Skull and Bones man. So he would have definitely recruited other Skull and Bones members into it. They not only recruited Americans, they included the entire Nazi network. And Buckley, having had a mother who was Swiss German, would have, and probably being able to speak German, would have been an optimum recruit in the CIA in those years. But he gets his invitation to Skull and Bones because he's in the oil industry and he's a family that works for the Rockefellers, who are also Skull and Bones.
Yeah.
Okay. After the CIA, what did he do? Or we don't know if he ever left the CIA, but his rest of his career.
He founded the National Review in 1955, and were a few publications devoted to conservative commentary. He served as the magazine's editor-in-chief until 1990. Okay.
The National Review is probably one of the most influential conservative publications in the United States of the Republican Party, diehard Republican, and very influential. And a lot of Catholics unwittingly sucked up what they read in that magazine. It put out the Masonic narrative to get Christians to transfer their loyalty from any possible Christian party to the Republican Party.
Yeah. In 1950s and early 1960s, Buckley opposed federal civil rights legislation and expressed support for continual racial segregation in the South.
Yeah, that's no surprise. Any groups that's allies of Hitler would be racist.
Yep.
What does he do after the 50s? What does he do in the 60s?
Okay. Buckley, blah, 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 blah. Here we go. Buckley claimed that the white South had the right to impose superior mores for whatever period it takes to effect a general cultural equality between the races. 2 weeks after the editorial was published, another prominent conservative writer, L. Brent Bostell Jr., Buckley's brother-in-law, wrote in the National Review, "This magazine has expressed views on racial questions that I consider dead wrong and capable of doing great hurt to the promotion of conservative causes. There's a law involved in the Constitution, and the editorial gives white Southerners leave to violate them both in order to keep the Negro politically impotent."
So we'll talk about Bostell after we finish the life of Buckley. So what does Buckley do in the 60s? As mentioned, his role.
Buckley's opposition to communism extended to support the overthrow and replacement of leftist governments by non-democratic forces. Buckley supported Spanish authoritarian. Yeah, he supported Franco.
Authoritarian. Yeah, authoritarian.
Who led the rightist military rebellion in its military defeat of the Spanish Republic. He called Franco an authentic national hero, applauding his overthrow of Spanish Republican visionaries, ideologues, Marxists, and nihilists. He supported the military dictatorship of General Augusto Pinochet, who led the 1973 coup that overthrew Chilean President Salvador Allende's democratically elected Marxist government. Buckley referred to Allende as a president who was defiling the Chilean constitution and waving proudly the banner of his friend and idol Fidel Castro. Now here's the Buckley rule. It states that the National Review will support the right or most viable candidate for a given office. Buckley first stated the Buckley rule during the 1964 Republican primary election featuring Barry Goldwater, and Nielsen Rockefeller. The rule is often misquoted and misapplied as proclaiming support for the right word most electable candidate, or simply the most electable candidate. According to the National Review's Neil B. Friedman, the Buckley rule meant that National Review would support somebody who saw the world as we did, somebody who would bring credit to our cause, somebody who, win or lose, would conservatize the Republican Party in the country. It meant somebody like Barry Goldwater.
Now, we have, as we've often explained, the Masons are experts at theater. The Rockefellers are what made the Buckley family wealthy. They're the ones that got Buckley recruited to Skull and Bones. So for his magazine to support Goldwater against Rockefeller was mere theater, because he probably at the same time was attending parties with Rockefeller. I only say that figuratively. So it's complete theater. Don't believe it at all about anything. So he was very influential. National Review was very influential. And I remember in my younger years, so many trads were saying, oh, you got to read the National Review. You have to read the National Review. Whenever I had an independent thought, it was, you had to read the National, you should be reading the National Review. And I felt like, why should anyone tell me what I should think? Why can't I think on my own? So I was always suspicious of the National Review. And I have to admit that I don't think I've ever read the National Review. Thanks be to God, now that I realize what's behind it. So that's pretty much sufficient on Buckley. Let's talk about Bostell, his friend. Who was he? How did he come to know Buckley? How close of friends were they? There's an interesting photo we have of the two, and how did they end up separating, and how does this lead to this foundation of Christendom College?
Leo Brent Bostell Jr., born January 15, 1926, died April 15, 1997, was an American conservative activist and so-called Roman Catholic writer.
Yeah. Now let's point out that both Buckley I think was a convert. I'm not sure if he was raised a Catholic, but at least the father's a convert. But Bostell is a convert. He wasn't born a Catholic.
Yeah. His parents were Lois and Leo B. Bostell, co-founder of the Bostell Worldwide. His wife was Patricia Lee Buckley, sister of William F. Buckley, and their 10 children included L. Brent Bostell III, also a conservative activist and founder and president of the Media Research Center, a conservative media watchdog group and publisher. Another son, Michael Bostell, is a Benedictine monk in the Solesmes Abbey in France.
Okay. Yeah. Well, it's because they're Catholic. So what does Bostell do in life? Where does he study? Where does he go to school?
Okay, Bostell was born in Omaha, Nebraska. He attended Creighton Preparatory School in Omaha. Bostell was the State American Legion oratorical contest champion of Nebraska in 1943 and 1944, winning the national title in 1944. He served in the U.S. Merchant Marine in the Pacific during World War II. Bostell resolved to convert to Catholicism in 1946, but after his father's death that same year, he deferred his decision until 1947 so as not to upset the family. A young, energetic, red-haired Yalie from Omaha, as he's described in Before the Storm, Barry Goldwater, and the Unmaking of the American Consensus. Bostell was the best friend and debating society teammate of William F. Buckley Jr. at Yale University, where he was the president of the Yale Political Union and Campus World Federalist Movement. Excuse me. Bostell was also a consistent supporter of Senator Joseph McCarthy, teaming up with his fellow National Review associate William F. Buckley Jr. in 1954 to write a ringing defense of him and McCarthy and his enemies, defending not only the man but the phenomenon, he wrote, McCarthyism. is a movement around which men of good will and stern morality can close ranks. He later joined McCarthy's staff shortly after Roy Cohn left, writing McCarthy's defense speech for the committee seeking to censure him, as well as a series of policy speeches through at least 1956. In 1958, Bostell ran for the Maryland House of Delegates but lost. After this defeat, he proposed the formation of a new political party at one of the editors' evening meetings in New York. The idea was summarily rejected by the more fusionist editors Buckley and James Burnham. He later worked as a speechwriter for Senator Barry Goldwater, for whom he ghostwrote the 1960 book, The Conscience of the Conservative. He was a founding member of the Young Americans for Freedom. In 1960, he took his family to Spain for the first time, making him absent from the Palm Beach decision of Buckley, Goldwater, and Russell Kirk and William Brodie Sr. to freeze out the John Birch Society from the conservative movement.
I'll just point out here, let's notice, Buckley practiced the Masonic method of blacklisting people, okay? And this is something we see in controlled Catholic media. Our order has been frozen out ever since it was founded by all the leading Catholic speakers in the English-speaking world. And that can't happen unless it's a decision. I mean, comments are all erased. You don't get any links from even comment sections of their website. So they must have these meetings regularly and decide to freeze people out who aren't part of the Masonic narrative. And we'll show you how now Bostell goes on to spread. You can remember, Bostell would have never been like this with Buckley unless he was also a Mason, okay? And perhaps Skull and Bones. We don't know if Bostell is Skull and Bones, but it certainly seems like he was, because National Review, Skull and Bones.
Yeah. So after all that, Bostell would not have any reason to be opposed to the decision, but in fact, he, along with Frank Mayer and William Rushert, protested exclusion of the society from the conservative movement. After the failed attempt to draft Goldwater at the 1960 Republican National Convention, Bostell, a strong proponent of Goldwater candidacy, was disappointed and annoyed by the would-be candidate's firm endorsement of the moderate Richard Nixon Henry Cabot Lodge Jr. ticket. In 1962, addressing an 18,500 strong conservative rally in New York City, Madison Square Garden, he issued a rhetorical order to Berlin commander, tear down the Berlin Wall, which would be echoed more famously 25 years later by Ronald Reagan, who exhorted Mikhail Gorbachev to tear down this wall.
So the Republicans recycle things, but you got to remember when Bostell goes to Spain, that's a pretty important decision because Spain is still being ruled by Franco, so he moves from the United States to a regime that I'll make a sideline comment about Franco. Franco, what he did to save Spain from a communist takeover of the government, did an excellent Catholic heroic thing. That goes all the way up to the end of the Civil War. What happens after the Civil War is he makes a pragmatic decision to accept help from Hitler, who I guess appeared to him to be conservative. He didn't know Hitler was backed entirely by Freemasonry. And he becomes more entrapped in the orbit of the entire Masonic controlled so-called far right in Europe. And from then on, the Franco regime becomes more and more authoritarian, totalitarian, and dictatorial, and less inspired by Catholic values, although it never renounced the Catholic faith and always defended it. So Spain becomes a hotbed for hiding Nazis, getting Nazis out of Germany, hiding Nazi wealth. If Nazi planes crashed in Germany during the war, Franco repaired them and sent them back to Germany. That happened to a distant relative of yours, AJ.
Yep.
And that we investigated. That was interesting study that we did. So Franco, after the Civil War, the country becomes entwined in this kind of a control, but certainly by the 60s, it's definitely, I would say it's definitely heavily infiltrated by these Gladio organizations, these CIA organizations, these far right. So for Bostell to go to Spain is perfectly in accord with the two faces he has, one of a devout Catholic and the other is a Freemason operative.
Yeah. Now we're going to start hearing a lot of names that's going to sound familiar to a lot of Christian graduates because, well, these are the founding fathers of Christendom College that you're going to be hearing right now.
And you probably didn't know where they were involved in. Matter of fact, it's very interesting. If you try to go on the internet and look for a biography of the founders of Christendom College, you find almost no information. And I can tell you one thing for having worked very closely with academics. My father was an academic professor at Columbia University. That's impossible. Founders of universities, some student will write up a biography. The history department will do something. They don't hide who they were. They tell you all about them. But Christendom College seems to be pretty mum on who founded them. Now we're going to show you why they're mum, because if you find out who founded them, you probably wouldn't send your kids there. So let's go with it.
So after 1964, he ran for the U.S. House of Representatives of Maryland against Charles Mathis, and of course he lost. And so, 1965, he moved his family to Spain purportedly because he breathed the Catholic thing there, along with Frederick Wilhelmsman and William Marshner, among others, founded the Catholic magazine Triumph in 1966, which Bostell intended to be the bulwark of Catholic orthodoxy, and a sort of a national review for Catholics.
Okay, I'm going to pause a second. This guy converts to the Catholic faith, and he founds a magazine to be the bulwark of Catholic orthodoxy. I mean, who does he think he is? He wasn't raised a Catholic. And this is the same thing as Taylor Marshall. Who else? The people who left the faith and came back. Anne Barnhart, she wasn't raised a Catholic. People who converted came back. Mike Voris, John Henry Weston, even Frank Walker. All met people. Those three left the faith and came back, they say. I believe Frank Walker came back. And or people like Skojek, who were like doing something totally different until they came to Washington and all of a sudden got in the Wall Street Journal and got all this funding. So we see the exact same game playing, and it's because the same hand is behind it, in my opinion. Let's continue.
Yeah. So, who wrote for this magazine? Russell Kirk, a Catholic convert. Christopher Dawson's, that's sketchy right there, folks, is the award he gets from the British Academy is right in downtown London, where MI6 is headquartered. Okay. We got a lot of spy stuff going on here, don't you see that?
Yeah, we're going to see. Yeah, everyone so far is involved with the spy. I think Bostell was the only one not recruited in the CIA, as far as we know. But his magazine, it's interesting. So who else worked? Do we have more interesting names in the magazine, or we'll go on to his summer school?
Eric von Kutnelt Ledinen, John Lukács, Thomas Molnar, Jeffrey Hart, Sir Arnold Loon, Charles Jonet, Rose John Rushdumi, a Calvinist.
A Calvinist on a Catholic paper that's supposed to be Catholic orthodoxies. Isn't that, that sounds to me fraudulent. Okay, so, I mean, if you're a Catholic, you should know that a Calvinist has a theology so perverse, you can never let him write in a Catholic journal. Okay, so you want to go through those names first, and then we'll get to the founders of Christendom College, or we'll go to the founders first and then work backward?
Let's go to, I want to go to Dawson's to get that.
Okay.
He's also a Roman Catholic convert.
Oh, another convert telling Catholics how to live. That's so. Mm-hmm.
And He was considered a leading Catholic historian, a lecturer in history of culture. He went to the University College at Exeter, Forward lecturer in the philosophy of religion at University of Liverpool, Guildford lecturer at the University of Edinburgh, Chauncey Stillman professor of Roman Catholic Studies at Harvard, and a fellow of the British Academy in 1943.
Okay, so right during the war, he's made a fellow of the British Academy, which is a completely Masonic organization. How interesting is that? So after Dawson, what other interesting figures we have there? How about Sir Lund?
Oh yeah. He was a convert to Roman Catholicism.
Oh, another convert. Oh, wonderful.
He was a skier, mountaineer, a writer, was knighted for services to the British King and Anglo-Swiss relations in 1952. His father was a lay Methodist minister.
And was there's something about Lund? Wasn't he involved in British military intelligence? So trying to think, there's something about Lund we had found out.
Oh yes. Lund was a supporter of Benito Mussolini and he was pro-Franco as well.
Okay, another pro-fascist. And just as a writer, what was his work?
Lund later became a friend of William F. Buckley Jr., contributed to Buckley's National Review, and Lund's writing for the publication are marked by strong anti-communist sentiments, and later on he became a Catholic and joined the National Review for Catholics by Bostell.
Okay, so boy, it seems like all these people are converts. None of them are actually born Catholic, and they're all friends of Buckley. So any other interesting names in that list of those who worked for Triumph Magazine? We're talking about Triumph Magazine because Triumph Magazine is the is directly involved in the historic sequence of causes that brings about Christendom College.
William Marshner.
Oh yes, William Marshner. Who's William Marshner?
He's a retired emeritus professor of theology at Christendom College in Front Royal, Virginia. He was a co-author of the Cultural Conservative, a new national agenda. Okay.
Where was he born? Was he raised a Catholic?
He was born in Baltimore, August 14, 1943. He earned his baccalaureate at the Lutheran Republican, it's called Republican, folks, Gettysburg College. He went on to graduate study at in ancient Near Eastern languages in Yale University.
Oh, another one who attended Yale. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
So ancient Near East languages, that's like Syriac and Aramaic and Arabic and Babylonian and Sumerian. That's the languages Freemasons study.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. He was elected to the membership in the Party of the Right. And now all this falls under the political union at Yale, which controls all of these right, left, center, whatever political deals.
Yeah. Bostell was the president of the union, and wasn't Buckley the founder of the Party of the Right, I think. So Marshner is in the Party of the Right too. So these aren't insignificant individuals at Yale.
And he meets Bostell at the meeting at the Union. Even then, he meets the Prussian. There's nothing on him. Frederick
Williamson.
Frederick D. Williamson at the meetings of the Philadelphia Society at Yale Graduate School, founded by who? Buckley.
So Buckley founds the Philadelphia Society.
Yep.
Yeah, so all these people are the same circle, though Marshner is a generation younger than them all. So what does Marshner go on to do after these close Masonic associations at Yale?
He left. He was fed up with the so-called radical left-dominated campus atmosphere in 1971 to become the editor of Triumph. He was also a contributing editor to The Wanderer. He also earned his MA in philosophy from the University of Dallas and the STL and STD degrees from the Pontifical Lateran University.
I'll just point out that this Williamson goes on to teach at Dallas. Okay.
Yeah.
And Williamson, according to one source, is born in Detroit. We've tried to do a biographic search. There's like nothing on the internet of where this guy is from, who's he from, where he studied. We have yet to do research on him, but he plays a key role in all of this. So that's Marshner. Any other interesting names on the staff of Triumph Magazine?
Well, we
Do we have any?
We talked about the Prussian, but there's nothing to talk about.
He was a professor of philosophy, we know that, but he taught in Spain. He taught many years in Spain, and he was another one of these pro-Franco individuals on Triumph magazine. So as you can see, the title of the magazine, Triumph, really should be called Recent Convert, because the writers are mostly recent converts. And they're not about what we Catholics at Ordo Militaris would talk about Triumph. Triumph for us would be like Lepanto, the Battle of Vienna, the capture of Jerusalem, that's Triumph. Deus Vult, they're not about that. But this is one of the things that Masonic organizations do. They take names that have great significance to Catholics. They use them to attract your attention to something else. And we see this, unfortunately, being done in a lot of Catholic apostolates. There's Church Militant. Well, what Church Militant out of Detroit does is not what Church Militant. The Church Militant is a title for the whole Mother Church and how we should be active in promoting the faith. But Church Militant News is mostly talking about scandals in the church and attacking clerics, which is not what the word Church Militant does. Church Militant is attacking those outside, not those inside. And there's the Crusade channel of Mike Church, which isn't about crusading. As a matter of fact, we've asked them many times to help promote the work we do, which is in the true spirit of crusades, and they don't seem interested. So, you have that, use of Catholic names for other purposes. You have a lot of organizations claiming to be the Crusaders, football teams, but it's a very sacred word. That's not what it means. So let's continue our thing about how does now Bostell and Triumph magazine, how does this become Christendom College? What are the events that lead to this?
Yeah, after founding Triumph, Bostell also founded the Society of the Christian Commonwealth, whose educational arm, the Christian Commonwealth Institute, headed by Warren Carroll, conducted annual classes, lectures, seminars at the El Escorial in Spain.
Okay, now I'll point out the Escorial in Spain is the former royal palace. It's at Madrid. It's owned by the government. Okay, there is no way you can hold a course in that building during the Franco regime without permission of Franco. There's just no way to do it. So if they're holding classes there, that means they're like this with the Franco regime politically. And it probably means that this organization is a Gladio organization, maybe even funded by the CIA, or at least supported them. And this explains why all these people are involved, either with Yale, Skull and Bones, who founded the CIA, or they have been in military intelligence themselves, or they're admirers of fascism.
Yeah. The entirety of the original faculty of and of many other donors of Christendom College had attended the program in Spain, and were subscribers to Triumph. Carroll later remarked in his obituary for Bostell, in a very fundamental sense, Christendom College was a Triumph enterprise.
Yeah, and the other word for enterprise is op, as in military op or spy op or, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not our words, that's Carroll's words.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So maybe now, so they hold these summer conferences and it gathers support, and then Carroll decides to go out and find Christendom College, which is a slight name change on it. Let's now talk about William Carroll. Who was he? Who is he? What did he do in life? He doesn't seem associated with the others, but he gets involved in the Summer Institute. Let's see, when was he born? Who were his parents? How did he grow up? Where did he go to school?
The son of Herbert Allen Carroll and regional writer Gladys Hasty Carroll. So Warren Hasty Carroll was born on March 24th, 1932 in Maine. He received his BA in history from Bates College in 1953, his MA and PhD in history from Columbia University. His younger sister, Sarah Watson, who died 1 month after Warren in 2001, and both of their parents were Bates College graduates. He served at one time in the CIA's anti-communism division as a communist propaganda analyst.
Okay, now this is very interesting because we've tried to find out what years those are, and it's just his biography on the net has just been whitewashed. You can't find out what years he served. But surprise, surprise, we have another CIA agent here, like Buckley, and Buckley, CIA agent, founds National Review, and here we have William Carroll, CIA agent, going to found Christendom College. And this isn't just an accident of history, as you will see and will point out. This is why all these people get involved in it. So continue.
So during 1967 to 1972, he served on the staff of California State Senator, later U.S. Congressman John G. Smith. A year after his marriage to Ann Westhoff, Carroll converted from deism to Catholicism in 1968, began working for the Catholic magazine Triumph. In 1977, he founded Christendom College with the help of other Catholic laymen, in particular William H. Marshner, Jeffrey A. Meares, Raymond P. O'Haran, and Christian M. Burns. He served as the first president of the college located in Front Royal, Virginia, until 1985, as well as chairman of the history department until his retirement in 2002. At the time of his death, Carroll lived in Manassas, Virginia, with his wife Ann. Founder of the Seton School, Manassas, Virginia, and Seton Home Study School, as well as the author of Christ the King, Lord of History, as well as Christ in the Americas.
So we mentioned before that one of the chief goals of Skull and Bones is to control education. And here we have the wife of a CIA agent founding the Seton Home School study program that you thought was Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying it's not Catholic, but the woman who founded it was married to a CIA agent. So go and figure, who happens to be a very close friend of other military intelligence people.
Yeah.
What more can we say about Christendom College and some of its founders? Meares is still alive. He's one of the few that are still alive, and one of the other founders is still alive, though Meares broke his association with the college. I want to just mention something about the seal of Christendom College while we're on it. You would think that the college would be called Collegium Imperii Christi, or Christi Imperii. It would be the College of Christ's Empire, or almeno, or at least Collegium Christi Dominii, the College of the Dominion of Christ, because Christendom is not a word in Latin, okay, and they came up with Christendomniensis, which might be a late Latin word, but it's not really good Latin. Okay, and if you're going to put something Latin on your seal, you choose good Latin. The other strange thing about the seals, if you look at it artistically, it looks like the FBI seal. The way it's designed, just if you take away the words and symbols, it's basically the artistic format of the FBI seal. And one of these individuals worked for the FBI. I'm trying to think, was it Bostell? I forget now. The other thing is that if you look at the side, there's something strange on the shield. The shield has three symbols. At the bottom, there's a lamp. Then in the upper right corner is a rosary with some of the beads of the rosary turning into roses, but only part of the chain of the rosary, and it's shaped to look like a question mark. And then you have the papal seal. So Satanists read things backwards. They always read things counterclockwise. That's a satanic system. So let's read the shields counterclockwise just to see if we get a meaning. So the lamp is study. The question mark is doubt. And the symbol of the papacy is symbol of papacy. So foster doubt of the papacy. If you read that backward, the shield means foster doubt of the papacy.
Yeah.
I'm just telling you what it would mean if you read it backwards. I don't think they will say that that's what the shield means, but if it was a deep state skull and bones operation, wouldn't that be its operation?
Yeah.
That would be its operations. What more can we say about Christendom College, any of the individuals involved? If we've gone through all of them, pretty much, AJ?
Yeah.
One thing I find strange about Christendom College is I don't know any members of Christendom College that have become great defenders of Catholic Orthodoxy. That's the purpose of the school. Where are these graduates? And one, Brie Dale, who's quite proficient on Twitter, if you know Catholic Twitter, she's a great alumni of Christendom College, and it's interesting to know if you look at her career after Christendom College, she goes on to work for U.S. military intelligence, and she was asked on Twitter the other day, does she work for military intelligence? She said, no, I work in such and such and such and such. But one of those things she works in is IT systems from U.S. military intelligence. So she works for a corporation that is a military industrial contractor for U.S. military intelligence. Isn't that a coincidence that a school founded by people involved in U.S. military intelligence has graduates that go on and work for military intelligence?
Yeah.
I think that's unusual. But in the history of, there's another little interesting thing in the history of this. Bostell breaks with Buckley, at least appears to break with Buckley. He starts the pro-life movement in the 70s at the University of Dallas, and they organize a protest of a clinic, and they actually break into the clinic. And Buckley breaks with Bostell over that. But his pro-life organization that he founded was called, what was it called?
Well, they call it in English here in the National Review the Sons of Thunder, but we found out it's not that.
Yeah, in Spanish, the name is Hijos de la Tormenta, which doesn't mean sons of thunder, it means sons of the storm. So that's a very interesting thing. And he said, and we found a source that says that Bostell affirmed that he got permission from Spain to found this organization, okay? And we know that there were many right-wing groups in the Civil War in Spain, and that they were supported by Hitler. And now Hitler had a police force that he dissolved before the Second World War. It was called the Brown Shirts, and they were a homosexual organization of violent individuals who go around beating up the political opposition, beating up Jews. And what was the Brown Shirts' original name?
Let's see here. Storm Detachment.
Storm Detachment. And who was the head of the Brown Shirts in the end?
Adolf Hitler.
So, you know, if you were a neo-Nazi, the greatest honor your organization's greatest name would be like Sons of Adolf Hitler, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you couldn't say that openly, though, because you would be seen for what you are. So you'd have to use some other word like Sons of the Stormtroopers or Sons of the Storm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which is probably totally coincidence and has nothing to do with anything. But we'll leave you to think it out. One thing that deeply disturbs me is one of the most prominent graduates of Christendom College is Michael Matt, the current editor of The Remnant.
Mm-hmm.
And in the last 7 years, he's been pushing this novelty, theological novelty, would be condemned by all the saints and fathers of the church as heretical. Recognize and resist. And we talked about this before, but I want to mention it again. This is an abomination, okay? This is a Masonic abomination. Because in Catholic teaching, you must obey legitimate authority, but only legitimate authority, not illegitimate authority, okay? So if your father commands you to do something and you're under 18, you must obey him. But if the father of the family that lives next door commands you, you have no obligation to obey him. He's not your legitimate superior. And if your father commands you to do something evil, you don't have to obey him, because you only obey a legitimate superior in a legitimate thing. So if a man is the Pope, you must obey him in everything that's legitimate.
Mm-hmm.
So it is recognize, but it isn't resist. It's recognize and obey. Okay, that's the Catholic doctrine: recognize and obey. Recognize a legitimate Pope and obey a legitimate Pope. But what does Michael Matt mean by his phrase? Recognize someone who's obviously illegitimate, but as the Pope, and then resist him as if he's a legitimate superior and disobey a legitimate superior. It's completely diabolic. It cancels out both Catholic principles. It contradicts to both Catholic principles. You only recognize a legitimate superior, and you always obey a legitimate superior.
Mm-hmm.
Someone who's not a legitimate superior, it's not even a question of obedience. He has no authority over you. So I don't know where Michael Matt hatched this double heresy, but it's completely Masonic, and it's designed to hoodwink Catholics to transfer their loyalty over to Bergoglio, but in a certain like conservative way that you would expect out of the National Review or Triumph magazine, to not give them your obedience, play a political game. Whereas the Catholic approach is he the Pope? Let's look at what canon law says, because you either are the Pope or you're not the Pope. There's only two possibilities. And to be the Pope, you have to be canonically elected and Catholic. And Bergoglio is neither, okay? And if you go to YouTube, you can see my 1.5 hour documentary. So it's 3.5 hours, proving that Bergoglio was never canonically elected. There are other people who have shown he's a complete heretic. I think that's obvious to anyone who listens to what he says. Mm-hmm. So here we have Christendom College producing a graduate that goes on to push this completely twisted Masonic theory. I think I have the right to doubt that Christendom College is giving people an authentic Catholic formation. I think I can doubt that. Mm-hmm. How can these people who are all converts give anyone, even Carol's a convert, they're all converts, and yet they're telling people how to live in Christendom? Mm-hmm. I really doubt it. They never lived in Christendom as a child. They don't know what it is. If you don't grow up as a baby, as a Catholic, you don't have that natural sense of what Christendom is. And it has to be in a devout Catholic family. It can't be in a, So here, these people are presumptuous. They have outrageous pride to tell other people how to live the Catholic faith. They're all politically connected. They all trace back to some kind of military intelligence op, the CIA, the FBI, and a good number of them involved in Skull and Bones. So if you're a parent thinking of sending your kids to Christendom, I'd listen to what we just said and think about it. And if you have friends who are thinking of sending their kids to Christendom, please share with them this documentary we made for your protection, and because something just doesn't seem right at Christendom College. I'll just point out that Carol is buried on the college grounds. Now, there might be consecrated grounds there, but most Catholics are buried in Catholic cemeteries, not on college grounds. So maybe there is consecrated ground there. I'm not saying there's not, but interesting, Christendom College. I have to say, personally, I don't know anyone who went to Christendom College. So do you know anyone who went to Christendom College, AJ?
No.
Okay. So just to show you, we're totally independent. I've never had an argument with anyone from Christendom College. I've never had any legal problems with them. I don't know anything about them than what we have just studied. But as our Lord says, you don't pick grapes from thorns, okay? You're only going to find good fruit from good branches and good trunks. And you can't expect someone who's a convert to all of a sudden sprout good roots. And didn't. He's from outside the church. The old rule was, like St. Paul, when St. Paul converted, he may have preached a few days, but then he's kept quiet for 10 years, went in the desert and lived like a monk, because he knew he wasn't raised a Catholic. He didn't have that. He was a humble man, and that always was the rule, that converts don't preach, they don't teach, they become Catholic and keep quiet, because there's so many errors they could just bring over. And this has we've been hit in the Catholic Church in the United States, we've been hit by wave and wave of these converts that start telling us how to live the Catholic faith, but what they're doing is turning the Catholic Church in America into a Protestant or Marxist or Masonic institution, and there's pretty much little left of it other than that now.
Yeah. Well, I hope all this opens people's eyes, makes people think. I must say, when I was looking for a place to go back to college, I was looking at all these Catholic schools, and none of them was like, I'll just buy books and read the church fathers.
Yeah, because actually, a true Catholic university, that's what you would do. You would read all the writings of the saints and fathers of the church. You wouldn't waste your time with these two-bit pagan secularist idiots who don't know anything, you know. And we don't have true Catholic education in the United States. Most of it is the German model. Well, we talked about how the Freemasons and Skull and Bones Lodge brought over the German model of education, and corrupted education all in the United States, and that's part of their whole plan and purpose. And so it wouldn't be surprised if they were tasked to found a Catholic college to destroy what's left of Catholic education in the United States. Wouldn't be surprised. I'm not saying they did, but you know. So next time you see in the Remnant an article praising Franco, then now you understand why Michael Matt's running that piece. Yeah, or Benito Mussolini, you know.
Yeah. So please like and share this program all over social media, email, all those social media apps. Get it out there. And if you like what we do with these investigation pieces, please go to our website, ordl-militaris.net, and click on any of the show pages and become either a one-time supporter or a monthly supporter. None of it goes back to us, and everything goes back into getting new and better equipment. Hopefully, if you keep donating, we'll get a better camera system so it's not so slow and everything, and be quick like Brother Alexis on his end.
Okay, and thank you for your support and for those who've donated so far to Ordo Militaris Radio TV. We're going to do another report today on the war in Armenia, since it's heating up, and this is something which our order is intensely concerned about, the persecution of Christians around the world.
Yep, so stay tuned. This is Ordo Militaris Radio TV signing off for now. Deus Volt.
Deus Volt.